You don't get it, man. I was visiting my brother and he was wrong. It was him, but not him. His eyes, his smile, just wrong, man. The officer watched through the two-way mirror while Mark Clemens rattled on about people being replaced. Officer Lucas attended high school with Mark, and he isn't a bad guy by any means, just fell for the siren in the bottle. During Lucas's career, this wouldn't be the first time he arrested Mark. Why a pair of suits are interviewing the town drunk is beyond him. The older gentleman is a by-the-book type. Now, Lucas guessed he's ex-military. The intense gaze in his eyes displayed years of experience and horrid tragedies. His partner is young, fresh to the field and a red-headed smoke show. Her eyes as green as her horns. Lucas's brow rose when the suit stood and the man shook Mark's hand. He mumbled something and relief instantly washed over Mark's face. Lucas exited the observation room, waiting for the suits in the hallway. When they left interrogation, the older man approached and shook Lucas's hand. "Thank you, Officer Lucas," he said while retracting his hand. "You're welcome. Agent Murphy, was it?" Lucas scratched his head. "I still don't understand the importance of interviewing Mark. Don't get me wrong, he's a kind man, but often makes outlandish claims while under the influence. Protocol." Murphy adjusted his glasses. "You'd be surprised what is revealed when listening to those who are often disregarded." Murphy walked past without another word, and his partner in tow. She looked back and saw Officer Lucas standing abashed. "Don't you think that was a little harsh?" she asked Murphy. Murphy sighed. "Knights, when it comes to the outlandish, as Lucas puts it, it's often the undesirables who speak the truth because their claims scare normal people. Alternatively, people will use their crutches to disregard them because they threaten the illusion of some people's way of life." Knights nearly argued, but reminded herself how quickly her incident was rationalized as a bear attack. Still, it was often confusing. Why keep what lurks in the darkness a secret? During her training, a fellow recruit voiced this very same question. Their instructor, a soft-spoken elderly man, replied with this: "Fear. When the populace is scared, they act rashly. Knowledge of what lurks in the darkness will achieve nothing but needless bloodshed. Beings our Bureau has encountered are easily identified. However, others are not easily distinguished between human and monster. It is those factors that if the general population knows of the threats that may stand beside them, will result in paranoia, terror, and violence. It's not a matter of if, but when the people would slaughter one another simply from unbridled suspicion." On one hand, she believed the average person wouldn't resort to such violence. On the other, she remembers how she reacted when her brother was killed by ghouls. Anger, sadness, vengeance, and in hindsight, a death wish. Perhaps secrecy is for the best. She weighed the pros and cons while following Murphy to their vehicle, a 1969 black Chevy Camaro. A bit over the top for field agents, but Murphy refused to drive anything else. Taking their seats, Murphy manning the wheel naturally, they both sighed. "What now?" Knights asked. "We enter Phillipsburg and conduct our investigation." Murphy adjusted his glasses. "Interview, search for anything strange." Murphy turned the car's engine without another word and began their journey. The drive took nearly an hour and a half, during which the agents remained silent. Murphy rarely talks, only speaking when relaying information or questioning individuals. Knights is perfectly content with that. Given her introverted nature, she enjoyed silent rides. She spent the drive researching Phillipsburg. small town in Montana whose populace consists of truckers, hunters, bar owners, and average working Joe. The town holds shortly under 900 souls. Knights believed this would make things simple, easy even. However, this proved to be false. Things became difficult because of course it did. Phillipsburg is homey. Not what Knights would consider overly welcome, but nice. Everyone she and Murphy encountered was kind, if a little prickly at times. All who were interviewed claimed no strange occurrences nor behavior from neighbors. The agents began to believe nothing really was happening, until they traveled deeper into town. The shift in behavior was so stark neither Murphy nor Knight could rationalize it away. Citizens interviewed spoke through smiles that never reached their eyes, delivered the same information as if rehearsed, but with slight detail and wording differentiations to not spark suspicion. They even caught some watching them in reflective surfaces. After 3 additional hours of interviews, Knight and Murphy sat in their Camaro. "Notice anything strange?" Murphy asked. "There is no Warren Ba Sing Se," Knight replied. "What?" Murphy's gaze turned quizzical with a hint of annoyance. Knight had to bite back the "God, you're old" comment. She knew he's testing her and suspected she already failed a part of it. 4 smiles, rehearsed responses, people watching her every move. Very good. Murphy turned the engine. Now we visit Mr. Clemens' brother, who is located. Knight reached into her jacket, retrieving a small notebook. Flipping through its pages, she answered, "Danny Clemens, West 7th Street, apartment number 3. Murphy nodded silently and slowly pushed forward. He slammed the brakes as a beat-up pickup truck rushed by and nearly collided with their front bumper. The truck's occupants glared at them. Murphy glared back. He grumbled, continuing the forward motion. Neither agents failed to recognize the unspoken threat that was delivered. This did nothing but solidify their suspicions and give them more fuel to discover what is happening in this small town. Thankfully, finding Danny's apartment building wasn't difficult. The neighborhood was clean. Mowed lawns, pristine fences, built-in sprinkler systems. Danny's apartment, on the other hand, stood in stark contrast to its surroundings. Chipping paint, decaying wood, cracked windows, and the stench of body odor and drug use. Danny lives here? Knight ran her gaze across the building and neighborhood. The only thing missing is the slumlord. Cannon Knights, Murphy stated sternly. We have work to do. Leaving their vehicle, they scoped the building, discovering it consisted of 5 units, 2 large apartments on the first floor, 3 units on the second. Finding a side door that led to a staircase, they entered. Ascending upward, their steps echoed loudly around them, rendering the chance of surprise non-existent. Reaching the top, they found 1 unit to their left and 2 units to the right. Apartment 3 stood at the far end of the hallway to their right. Approaching the door, Unit 4's door cracked open. An older woman, in mid-50s by Knight's guess, peered at them. She immediately shut the door and latched it. Knight thought this was to be strange, then thought, to be fair, if she was living in a building that drugs are used or distributed, she would duck down the second a pair of suits popped up too. Murphy knocked apartment 3's door, and it creaked open. Knight and Murphy drew their weapons and entered. Scanning the room, they found a couch, coffee table, a stand with small TV with nothing else. Directly left, a long stretch revealed the rest of the unit, leading to the kitchen followed by a bathroom and bedroom. They slowly moved, checking corners and blind spots. Murphy motioned Knight to check the bathroom while proceeding into the bedroom. Murphy swept through the bedroom, checking the closet and under the bed. He shouted clear, and Knight replied that he should see this. He regrouped with his partner, following her pointed finger. He stilled, spotting a bathtub filled nearly to the brim with blood. Holstering his sidearm, he ordered Knight to keep hers trained on the tub. Murphy knelt beside the tub and dipped his pen in. Retracting, he watched the substance ooze off the pen. It wasn't blood, at least not entirely. The substance is more akin to snail mucin. He retrieved a vial and tissue from his jacket. Applying latex gloves, he wiped the pen and retrieved a sample of the tub's contents. Slipping the vial and tissue into a Ziploc bag, he motioned Knight to exit the premises. Returning to their vehicle, they sighed. "What the hell are we dealing with, Murphy?" Knight asked, rubbing her forehead. "I have a few ideas," he answered. He gazed down the street, spotting a teen, 16, possibly 17, stop his walk to pet a pit bull and converse with an elderly couple while they tended to their garden. "But I won't make any conclusions until the sample is analyzed." It was nearly 6 p.m. by the time they reached their motel on the outskirts of town. Murphy called headquarters while Knight distributed their dinner on paper plates. McDonald's dinner, but hey, you've got to eat. 2 hours passed until rhythmic knocks pounded their door. Murphy retrieved the Ziploc bag and greeted the fellow agent when opening the door. Knight didn't recognize the agent, a short man and a little pudgy. Murphy and the agent conversed briefly before he gave the man the bag. The agent nodded and informed results will be delivered ASAP. Murphy thanked him before closing the door. Knight asked how long before results come in. Murphy sighed as he laid on his bed. Could be tomorrow, could be next week. Until then, they continue their investigation for now. For 3 days, the agents traveled through Phillipsburg, interviewing residents and searching for any more clues. After discovering the tub of mucin, Phillipsburg's residents became tight-lipped, and Murphy caught people watching them everywhere they went. In hopes of spotting Danny Clemens entering or leaving his apartment, they parked down West 7th Street every day at 5 p.m. 5 p.m. is when most of the people get off work, but Danny never showed. They would stay until midnight and his apartment lights remained off. During those 3 days, everything proceeded like clockwork. People came home, settled in, and went about their nightly rituals. Even that teenager would be seen walking down the street, only stopping to pet a pit bull and speak with an elderly couple. It was night 4 that the routine changed. The teen failed to show between 5:30 and 5:45 p.m. Knight argued that summer vacation has started for the schools. Perhaps he simply stayed home. Murphy grunted at the thought, but still kept his eyes searching for the boy. At 11:42 p.m., he spotted him. The teen walked briskly with earbuds in his ears. Both agents sighed in relief. They watched him walk, and when reaching the elderly couple's house, the boy rushed forward, noticing the living room lights was on. The boy froze, like a deer in headlights. Moments passed, and his eyes grew increasingly horrified. Then he bolted down the street like a fire ignited in his pants. Murphy exited the vehicle, ordering Knight to follow the boy. Swiftly, she changed seats and drove away in pursuit. Knight followed the boy until he rushed inside his home. Frankly, she was a little impressed. Kid sprinted what was easily a 20-minute walk in 7. Whatever he saw really made him move. Knight pulled out her phone, messaging Murphy the kid made it home safe. He replied shortly after to keep an eye on the place while he scoped the elderly couple's residence. Minutes passed before Knight messaged him again, wondering if the police should be called. Murphy replied to not bother because the cops have just pulled up. Knight scrunched her brow and looked back at the kid's house. She could clearly see him on his phone speaking frantically. An hour later, Murphy messaged Knights to hide in an alleyway. The police have left and heading in her direction. She did as instructed and watched two officers pull up. They knocked on the kid's front door and conversed with his parents. 3 minutes. 3 minutes passed and the cops drove off. Knights scowled. The kid was terrified and the cops basically told him to pound sand. She messaged Murphy informing him that the police are gone. He replied that he's walking down the street and to pick him up. She found him traveling the sidewalk barely 5 minutes later. She pulled over and snickered when he approached the driver's side. Changing seats, she waited until Murphy sat down. "Well, safe to say the police are compromised," Knight said. Murphy perked up. "Oh? What makes you say that?" The kid was on the phone presumably with dispatch when you informed me the cops have already arrived at the couple's place. She was rewarded with one of Murphy's rare smiles. "They are compromised," he assured. The police entered the elder's residence without knocking. Remained there for nearly an hour. They drug a couple bodies deeper within. As to where, I don't know. Couldn't risk being discovered. "Do we call for backup?" Knights asked. "Not yet," Murphy sighed. "It remains unclear what we are dealing with. Our next priority is to monitor that kid. He saw something he shouldn't have." Knights wasn't satisfied with this answer. It felt as if they were half-stepping. Flashes from her training days crossed her mind. One of her instructors, a rigid military woman, gave this nugget of knowledge. "What is the greatest weapon an agent in the field can have? Put your hands down, because I'll tell you right now, you are wrong! Information and preparation are your strongest weapons. The Lamia and Gorgon, strikingly similar in appearance, vastly different in MO. One charms and constricts, the other petrifies and drinks. Can anyone tell me the difference? Put your hands down! You can't! You lot don't know their scent, their den layout, nor hunting habits. Assumption is the death of yourself and the ones who stand beside you. If you're lucky." She removed her prosthetic and showed the mangled scarred stump that was her left arm. "Walk away mutilated. You will research the Lamia and Gorgon, and you will turn in your papers on how to identify and eliminate them by 0900. Dismissed!" Knights understood the logic. It just felt they were in over their heads. She believed reinforcements are needed. In retrospect, during her initial encounter with ghouls, she didn't have the knowledge to properly eliminate them. If not for Murphy, she would have been torn apart. Thinking back was when she truly understood. She was one person who didn't understand what she was facing. What would happen to a half dozen souls if they entered unprepared? She pushed the thought deep into her mind. Her job is to follow Senior Agent Murphy's lead, and he has given an order. Monitor the kid. Returning to their motel, the agents researched the two families. Murphy uncovered the elderly couple to be the Roberts. Sam Roberts is the former police chief, retired. His wife, Elizabeth Roberts, a retired ER nurse. No living relatives, only their pit bull Rocco. Knights discovered the kid to be Dennis Allison, 17-year-old high school student. His mother, Mary, is a teacher for Phillipsburg Elementary School. His father, Andrew, works the mines. The following morning, Murphy instructed Knights to watch the Allison residence while he watches the Roberts. Every hour on the hour they are to check in, only contacting otherwise if anything occurs. Knights sat within the Camaro a half block from the Allison residence, groaning internally. She knew Murphy gave her this station to keep her far from the suspected danger. It was smart. Have the seasoned agent closer to danger, and the greenhorn as backup. Still, it felt like she was placed at the kids' table. She watched Andrew Allison leave his home at 6:30 a.m. sharp. He tossed his gear into his car along with the lunchbox. All remained quiet until Mary drove off, returning 40 minutes later with groceries. Nights began to grow bored around 5 p.m. Nodding off, she jostled awake when Dennis left his home. Dennis looked determined and walked with purpose. Immediately, she informed Murphy of Dennis's approach. Murphy replied that she is to remain there. There have been no changes at the Roberts residence and he'll tail Dennis until he reaches work. Aside from the hourly check-in, nothing happened until 11:38 p.m. Knight's phone jingled. She read Murphy's message, then focused her attention down the road. Minutes passed and she spotted Dennis sprinting towards her position. He stopped nearly 2 blocks from his house, panting and scanning the road behind him. Dennis sighed, wiped his mouth and took deep breaths before approaching his home. Knight watched him walk up to his front door. "What the hell?" she said. Across the street, under a street lamp, stood Sam and Elizabeth Roberts. Dennis noticed them in his door's window reflection. Knight scrambled out of her car as they stepped forward. Dennis safely made it inside and the couple turned their attention on Knight's. She froze when their eyes met. They smiled and waved. Instinctively, she drew her sidearm, and the couple responded by sprinting down the street far faster than a human in their prime could ever hope to achieve. Knight began to give chase, but halted when a deep voice shouted to stop. Murphy drove beside her, ordering her to enter. "What the shit, Murphy?" Knight yelled as she entered the passenger seat. "What are they? Those things ran like those pansy vampires from Twilight. And how did you get here so fast?" "Tailed Dennis the second he bolted," Murphy answered as they drove off. "And I don't know, but that display reduced the possibilities to 2, both unpleasant." Murphy refused to elaborate. Knight could see the anxiety rise within him, tapping a finger on the steering wheel, flared nostrils and his eyes far more alert as they passed any dark alley. Returning to their motel, Murphy called HQ, relaying the recent events and status of the sample. Unfortunately, testing remains ongoing. Fortunately, HQ deployed 4 squads, and once results come in, those squads will proceed with containment protocols. Knight and Murphy are ordered to continue observation. The following day, field agents manned their stations. All was calm, quiet even. 5 p.m. rolled around and Knight waited for Dennis to leave his home but remained inside. She began to worry until spotting him playing games in his room. It was difficult to watch him since his room is on the 2nd floor, but she surmised he decided to take the day off. Smart. Made it easier to keep an eye on him. During their hourly check-in, Knight informed Murphy of Dennis's rest day. Murphy, in turn, informed the Roberts have failed in appearance and no movement has been spotted in or around the residence. Perhaps they moved on. It was a possibility, but Murphy wasn't convinced. He decided that they'll observe until 8 p.m. and turn in if nothing occurs. Knight loved that idea. Sleeping more than 5 hours tonight sounded wonderful. Thankfully, nothing happened and the field agents slipped into bed by 9:30. Morning proceeded with no issue. The field agents ate breakfast, prepared lunches, and manned their stations. Murphy informed the Roberts residents remained silent. Knight relayed that Andrew Allison left for work at 6:30 a.m. once again. As time went by, it truly seemed all has calmed down. Perhaps the creatures were spooked and left town. Or perhaps they wised up and are keeping their heads down. Either way, once the Allison's safety is assured, the field agents must track the creatures down. 4 p.m. came and Knight observed Andrew's return. He exited his truck and appeared happy, elated even. With a pep in his step, Andrew entered his home. Knight paid no concern to this. Figured it might be the man's start of his weekend. At 5:30, Mary left her home with Dennis in tow. Andrew stopped Dennis and handed his son an envelope with a wink. Knights messaged Murphy that Dennis is heading to work. Murphy replied he'll keep an eye on him. She is to remain at her post. Knights complied, watching Mary return 15 minutes later. Mary parked and was surprised to find Andrew waiting beside their front door. She smirked, and he approached. Rubbing his hands on her shoulders, he spoke briefly, and Mary jittered with barely contained excitement. She rushed back to her car, but paused when noticing Andrew enter his truck. He motioned to follow before pulling out the driveway. Mary followed soon after. Knights furrowed her brow. Why take both vehicles? She sent another message to keep Murphy in the loop. He said to watch the house in case any visitors pop up. None did. Knights is embarrassed to admit it, but she began nodding off shortly after 9. Her phone rang, jostling her awake. Quickly scanning her surroundings, she answered. Knights, Murphy said. Any changes at the Allison residence? No. Knights yawned. All is quiet. Good. The screech of her chair sounded through the phone. Pick me up. Dennis is wrapping up his shift. Knights glanced at the time. 10:04 p.m. Shit, she fell asleep. Revving the engine, she made her way towards Murphy, mentally reprimanding herself the whole time. Anything could have happened, and she would have been none the wiser. Pulling up to the restaurant, a small ma-and-pa business, she found Murphy waiting beside the road. Changing seats, she smirked when he immediately approached the driver's side. Why'd you call me here? Knights asked. Dennis's last shift, he replied. We will tail him home, then search the perimeter. They waited for Dennis. Once he left the restaurant, they held off until he was a block ahead before following. Both agents noticed Danny walk calmer, head held high like a weight finally lifted. He maintained his pace until approaching the Roberts residence. Dennis paused, scanned the house, and released a sigh he didn't realize he was holding. Rolling his shoulders, Dennis continued walking. As the agents followed, they inspected Robert's house, trying to spot any movement. Nothing made its presence known, mercifully. Dennis made it home without incident. Knights noticed his parents' vehicles are still absent from the driveway. She surmised that they're at the bar. Murphy insisted they observe a while longer. Time went on, and Dennis did nothing but play some games on the living room TV and make a late night snack. He settled down around 1:20 a.m. and ascended the stairs. The agents sighed in relief, both from the opportunity to turn in themselves and Dennis's safety. Murphy turned the engine, first scoped the area, then returned to the motel. What the fuck? Knight said, pointing towards the house. Murphy followed her finger. A mass crawled out of the home's basement window. It slowly stood, standing roughly 5'8". Murphy grabbed a flashlight from beneath his seat and illuminated the area. Jesus Christ! A rugged, black-haired man turned his attention towards them. His shirt and pants blackened with blood. His lips stretched as he smiled. His teeth smeared red, and he drooled as he raised his hand. He just smiled and waved. Clemens? Knights pondered. That's Danny Clemens! Danny sprinted down the street. Murphy swore and switched to drive. Escalating speed, they kept pace with Danny, but shit, he was running 40 miles an hour. Block by block, turn by turn, they chased Danny. Reaching a dirt road, Danny approached the tree line. Call this in, Knights, Murphy pointed at the glove box. Now! Following his orders, she opened the glove box where an emergency radio is stored. She tuned the radio and brought it to her lips. Eagle's Nest, this is Early Bird 2. Runner is approaching Beaverhead National Forest, south, 40 miles an hour. Male, 5'8", covered in blood. The radio crackled and a man responded.
Acknowledged, Early Bird 2. Road Runner Team 3 moving to intercept.
Knights returned the radio and watched Danny. He's running fast but continuing in a straight line. He's not bobbing or weaving, not taking cover within the trees. This feels like a trap, Knight said. Murphy slammed the brakes and punched the dashboard. A fucking distraction! Quickly he turned the car and sped back to town. Faster and faster he lead foot the gas pedal, narrowly missing deer and passing cars. The agents prayed, pleaded they'd make it in time. Murphy stopped beside the Allison residence hoping to find lit lights, but only found darkness and shattered glass. I got the call at 3 a.m. Been doing this job for nearly 2 decades and am accustomed to early calls, but nothing prepares you for the loss of a loved one. Mary and I were high school sweethearts, but when we graduated, she wanted to settle down and I wasn't ready. I'm still not. I wanted to follow my dream of becoming an officer. I succeeded, but Mary and I drifted apart. She married Andrew and invited me to their wedding. He's a kind man, a good man who treated Mary with the love that she deserves. I was there for Dennis's birth, and his parents made me his godfather. I was honored, and Dennis is a smart kid with a bright future ahead of him. Never in my most horrid nightmares did I envision myself pulling up to their home while Dennis vanished and his parents wheeled away in body bags. It felt odd being referred as Mr. Lucas rather than officer. In that moment, I wasn't an officer. I was Dennis's emergency contact. Seeing CSI wheel the bodies of my friends, it took everything I had not to run to them, to cry or scream. I stood there numb while I was questioned if Dennis contacted me or if I noticed anything strange in his behavior. I knew nothing. I then noticed the suits who visited my precinct nearly a week ago. Agent Murphy. He stood in front of my friend's home with what appeared to be a journal in his hands. He closed it and readjusted his glasses. His partner, the red-headed hottie, approached him. Agent Knights, if I remember correctly. Murphy handed the journal to her, and after a few moments they conversed silently. They left the scene with the journal. That wasn't protocol. That journal is evidence. I don't know what's happening, but my gut is telling me the suits have an idea. I made my decision. It will likely cost my badge, but consequences be damned. I will find Dennis.